Hello, welcome to Family Leisure's Pool School. Today we're going to talk about how to take care of your swimming pool in the simplest and easiest method possible. Now there are lots and lots of ways of taking care of a swimming pool. Many alternatives, but not all of them are simple, easy, and inexpensive. Throughout the course of this pool school, we will talk about all of the various options that are out there, but our primary emphasis will be how to make sure that it's simple, easy, and inexpensive. Now, one thing that I'd like to share, or a story I'd like to share from doing pool schools for 25 years now, is that I have encountered basically three types of pool owners. And two of those pool owner types have problems. The first person who has problems taking care of their swimming pool is that neighbor that you have that never cuts his grass. You know, he waits till it gets high and then the neighbors complain, then he goes and cuts his grass, and you know, that guy will always have problems taking care of his pool. Because there is some things that you simply have to do. There's a minimum level of performance that has to be maintained in taking care of a swimming pool. Now we believe it should never take more than 15, 20, or 30 minutes a week to take care of a pool. So it can be simple and easy, but you do have to do it. The second type of customer or pool owner who has a problem is that person who you see on Saturday mornings. 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock Saturday morning, they're out there trimming their hedges with the scissors or etching the sidewalk to make sure the grass looks perfect and everything is manicured. That person also has problems with their pool because they'll go out there on Saturday mornings after taking care of their hedges and they'll test the water. So they test the water and say, oh, it says my pH is 6.8. Mike told me it should be 7.2, so I'm wrong by 0.4. Well, it says I need 1 pound per 10,000 gallons. I have 15,000 gallons, so I need 3 pounds of pH plus to raise my pH to where it should be. So go into the house, get the pH plus, measure it out, get 3 pounds exactly, pour it into the skimmer, and it says, oh, I should wait 2 hours and test it again. Well, so he waits the 2 hours, tests the water again, says, oh no, now my pH is a little high. I better check it again and I'll add some pH minus. Well, you can see that this can go on and on and on, and he's always messing with his pool. Well, that will always cause problems. Number one, it's no longer simple and easy. And number two, you're not allowing the water to just balance. You know, God created water to balance itself. You simply have to add some sterilizing agents and things like that, which we will talk about, but it's really got to be simple. You know, I get the phone call all the time from customers who will say, hey Mike, my water's just a little bit green. Is it safe for the kids to go swimming? Well, I always want to say, no, I'd stay away from that water. I'd go up to the lake. You know, go swimming at the lake. Well, think about that. How many times when you're going to go water skiing on the river or the lake, do you ever test the water? Well, never. When you go to the ocean, do you ever test the water to see if it's safe? Well, of course not. It's just water. Well, it doesn't become something dangerous when it became pool water. It's still just water. So try to be like that third customer. The third person who owns a swimming pool walks out, he tests the water and says, it's a little wrong, but it's pretty close. It's okay. I'm just going to add what I'm supposed to add and I'm done. That guy never has problems with his pool because he makes it simple and easy. And that's the way to take care of a pool. Don't think that any of this stuff that I'm going to talk about today is complicated. I'll give you way more information than you need. It's simply to make it so that you understand what's going on. Okay, so we're going to talk about how do you test your pool water. Well, first of all, let's talk about what we're testing for. Well, the three things that you're going to test for, most important things you're going to test for, are alkalinity, pH, and chlorine. And those are in order of importance. First you test for alkalinity, then pH, and then chlorine. Now the way you actually test your water is with test strips. Now, we recommend test strips over the old OTO or Pheno Red because they're much more accurate. All you do, simply remove a test strip, put the lid of the bottle back on so it doesn't get wet, and then you simply dip the test strips into the water. Leave the bottom pad a little longer and pull the test strip out. Wait a second, then take the test strip and match it up against the colors on the vial. And what those are going to test for is, again, alkalinity, pH, and chlorine. So let's talk about what these things are. Alkalinity is a measure of the alkali ions in the water. Now that sounds very complicated. One of the things I want to mention is that you have available at your local family leisure store or online a copy of the Pool School Notes. You can print it off and you can follow along with what I'm going to talk about, but this is available, so don't try to take notes on this. This is just me trying to explain it. Alkalinity is a measure of how many alkali ions are in the water. Well, what happens, for example, if you took this glass of water and you started adding salt to the water, right? Wouldn't it get a little cloudy, get a little murky? Well, that's what happens when you have too much alkalinity in your pool water. So, first of all, that's not good because the water's not looking good. Second of all, how would you lower the concentration of salt in this water? Well, the easy way would be to just add some more water. So when you test for alkalinity, if it ever tests too high, simply add some fresh water. It will lower the alkalinity. Now, if it ever tests too low, then you have to add alkalinity plus. 1 pound per 10,000 gallons will raise it approximately 10 parts per million. The other reason that alkalinity is so important, besides how the water looks, is also because it has a very, very direct impact on pH. Remember, we're testing for alkalinity and pH. Well, pH is very important. So if alkalinity impacts pH, it's important to balance it first. If your alkalinity is ever too high, your pH will resist changes. So if your pH is too high or too low, the alkalinity will lock it in. And so you want to make sure your alkalinity is not too high. The other problem, and even worse, if your alkalinity is too low, it will make the pH bounce. All right? Now, alkalinity is important because it affects pH. But what is pH and why is it so important? pH is a measure of the percent hydrogen in the water. What that means is it's a measure of the acidity of the water. And that is very important for a lot of reasons. Number one, if the pH is wrong, any chlorine products that you add to the water, and most of the chemicals that you put in the water, if the pH is too high or too low, if it's wrong, the chemicals will break down and be ineffective. And that's very important because now you're wasting money on chemicals and you're not really taking care of the pool the way you want to. The other reason is much more important. All right, when you go swimming in a pool and the pH is wrong, see if you've ever experienced this. Okay, you go swimming in a pool and your eyes come out red and irritated. You know, your skin's a little itchy. What do you assume? You assume that the chlorine is too high. That's not necessarily the case. If the pH is wrong, the chlorine breaks down. It becomes a gas, and you smell it, and you think, oh, lots of chlorine in the water, and your eyes are red and irritated. Well, you guys have all seen the commercials, you know, the Johnson's Baby Shampoo, No More Tears. Well, what's that about? Well, the pH of your eyes is different than your skin. So when you read on that test strip that it wants to keep your pH between 7.2 and 7.6, well, there's a difference there. The pH of your eyes is about 7.1 to 7.2. So, for example, those of you who wear contacts, you know that you use a saline solution, which is a little more acidic than normal tap water. Because if you don't, it will irritate your eyes. So if you go swimming in a pool with the pH is above 7.6 or above 7.4 or below 7.2, it will irritate your eyes. The chlorine will be gassing off, you will smell it, and you're going to assume too much chlorine. And the truth of the matter is, it's probably just that the pH is wrong. So it's very, very important to keep the pH in line. Number one, you don't want to waste chemicals. And number two, you don't want the kids' eyes all red and irritated because the pH is wrong. Now, when you test the water for pH, if the pH is wrong, you're going to have to add chemicals. The first chemical, of course, is pH plus, and the second chemical is pH minus. Now, if the pH is low, you're going to add pH plus, of course. pH plus would be added at 1 pound per 10,000 gallons to raise it 0.2 on the test strip. If the pH is high, you'll add pH minus. pH minus, you add 1 pound per 10,000 gallons to lower the pH about 0.2. So just refer to the Pool School notes to look at those formulas about how much to use. But remember, don't overthink this. If it's just wrong a little bit, don't do anything. Let the water balance. It's only if it's significantly wrong or if you notice the kid's eyes are red and irritated do you really have to worry too much about the pH. So as a review, the two most important things to start with are alkalinity and pH. Alkalinity is important because it impacts pH. pH is important because it impacts how well the chemicals are working, whether they're being effective, and it impacts whether or not the kids are getting red and irritated eyes. One thing I do want to mention, whenever you are adding chemicals, especially granular or tablet chemicals to the water, always add them into the skimmer as the water is circulating. Never just broadcast the chemicals out over the surface of the pool. Many of these chemicals, when they dissolve, will generate heat. The last thing you want to do is throw chemicals out in the pool, let them fall to the bottom, sit on the bottom of the pool, and generate heat. Always add granular chemicals or tablet chemicals into the basket on the side of the skimmer as the water is circulating so that you don't have any problems with chemicals out into the pool, number one, and so they dissolve evenly throughout the water. Now that we've talked about the foundations of water chemistry, namely pH and alkalinity, it's time to talk about how we're going to keep the water clean and clear. And that begins with sterilization. Now, historically, the most popular way to keep a pool clean and clear is by using chlorine. It's also one of the least expensive ways of taking care of a swimming pool. Unfortunately, there are many brands of chlorine available on the market. There are also three basic types of chlorine. First of all, there's calcium hypochlorite, sodium dichlor, and trichlorotriazinotrione. Now, I know that sounds complicated, these different types. That's one of the reasons we recommend that if at all possible, please purchase your chemicals for taking care of your pool here at Family Leisure, or go to your local pool store if that's not convenient, because we want you to buy the right chemical. Not necessarily the right brand, but the right chemical. For example, calcium hypochlorite. Calcium hypochlorite is really best used as a shock treatment. It's a combination of calcium and chlorine. Well, the advantage to that is it's very fast acting. It goes in, it kills, it does a lot of great things. The disadvantage to it is, in most cases, calcium hypochlorite is 56% calcium. Now, we have all experienced what happens when you get calcium in your water. It's called hard water. That's because calcium and chlorine can also form something called calcium chloride. We all know that as the white spots you get on your shower or that gritty feeling that you feel in your bathtub. That's caused by hard water. Well, if you continuously add calcium hypochlorite to your water, you can actually end up with hard water, and that has other issues. The second type of chlorine is sodium dichlor. Sodium dichlor is a very strong and fast-acting chlorine, but it's best used to try and clear up a problem with the pool because it goes in and then it goes out very quick. Trichlorotriazinotrione, we all call it trichlor. Trichlor is a very stable type of chlorine. It's designed to go into the water, stay working for an extended period of time, and that's the type of chlorine we're going to recommend. Trichlor is available in 1-inch tablets and 3-inch tablets. The most popular type of chlorine tablet or trichlor tablet is going to be a 3-inch tablet. And that is what we're going to talk about as far as how to take care of your pool. Before we talk about how we use the trichlor 3-inch tablets, we have to talk a little bit about how chlorine actually works. And that's important, not that I'm going to go into the chemistry right here, but you can, if you're interested in learning more about how chlorine works, you can go to the advanced version of Pool School, which will talk a little bit more about alkalinity, talk a little bit more about pH, and we'll get into more fundamentals of how chlorine actually works. But just for the easy version, chlorine, you have to understand that chlorine, the way it works is it attaches itself to things. And when it attaches itself to things, it kills it. So if it attaches itself to an algae, it kills it. If it attaches itself to bacteria or virus or anything, it kills it. That's the way chlorine works. Now, the reason that's important to understand is you have to understand that once chlorine attaches to something, it becomes stable. For example, when chlorine attaches to sodium, it forms sodium chloride. We know that as table salt. So chlorine, once it's attached to something, is no longer a poisonous killer. It is just a stable molecule. In fact, in that case, it even tastes good. So chlorine combines with things. Now the reason you have to know that is if you can keep putting lots and lots of chlorine in your water, and let's say for some reason you had a green pool, you had a lot of algae. Well, the chlorine goes in, but then it combines with stuff. And once it's combined, it's no longer active, it's no longer effective, it's no longer killing. You think there's a lot of chlorine in there, but it's all combined up. So that's why there's a product called Shock. Now, again, there are many, many, many brands of Shock available, but there really are three basic types of Shock. And again, we're going to recommend which type of shock you use, not based on the brand. We want to make sure you're using the right type of shock. The three types of shock that are available on the market is, first of all, sodium hypochlorite. Now that's commonly known as liquid chlorine. Now liquid chlorine is a very, very powerful shock. In fact, if you splash it on your clothes, it'll eat holes in it, bleach it white. So it's not really something you're going to want to deal with all the time. Very powerful, very fast acting. One downside to liquid chlorine is when you put it in the water, you really should not go swimming for 12 to 24 hours. Now I have a little bit of a problem with that. Why put something in the water that limits how often you can use the pool or when you can use the pool? So I'm really not ever going to recommend liquid chlorine. The second type of shock is calcium hypochlorite. Now we just talked about that a little while ago. Calcium hypochlorite is a very strong shock, and it's available at pool stores and especially at the mass merchants as a shock treatment. It's very inexpensive, it does work, but the disadvantage to calcium hypochlorite is it puts calcium into the water. If you have soft water, that's good, but most of us don't. And so I don't recommend calcium hypochlorite. The type of shock that I do recommend is called potassium monopersulfate. Big word. We call it Blast. That's our brand, is Blast. Now what potassium monopersulfate is, it's a very, very strong oxidizing agent, but it has no chlorine in it. There's no chlorine at all. What it does, it goes in and it burns off whatever is attached to the chlorine molecule. It frees it up to go out there and kill stuff and do its job. But it doesn't do it by putting chlorine in the water. And the reason that's important is if it doesn't put chlorine in the water, you can put the shock in and go swimming. So when we're talking about putting shock in on Sunday night, we're not saying don't go swimming on Sunday night with your family, even if it's a hot day. Potassium monopersulfate does the job, but it doesn't limit your use of the pool. So it's a lot safer, easier, and it works. So now that we understand how the chlorine works basically and the importance of shocking the pool to reactivate it, let's talk about the proper level of chlorine for your swimming pool. Now on the test strips, when you test your water, it's going to tell you that the ideal range is between 1 and 3 parts per million. And it is. That's the ideal range. But remember, if your pH is perfect, you can actually maintain a slightly higher chlorine level. But let's talk about how do you maintain 3 parts per million in a normal pool. So the rule of thumb is you're going to use one 3-inch tablet for every 5,000 gallons of your swimming pool. This is the type of tablet we're talking about. This is a 3-inch trichlor tablet. So we're talking about adding one 3-inch tablet for every 5,000 gallons 2 times per week. Now what that means is, for example, if you have a 24-foot by 52-inch pool, you have 15,000 gallons of water. So you're going to add 3 3-inch tablets 2 times a week for a total of 6 tablets per week. And that should maintain 3 parts per million in your 15,000 gallon pool. So as a recap, 1 tablet for every 5,000 gallons 2 times per week. And then based on your gallonage of your pool, that will tell you how many 3-inch tablets. Now remember, this is a trichlor tablet. This is also a professional strength trichlor tablet. The brand that we recommend is, of course, SwimClear. That is a professional grade tablet, which means it has a much higher level of active chlorine available to it. There are other brands. All of them, as long as you use a trichlor, will have chlorine. Of course, we would like for you to buy our brand because it's stronger. We know it works. But any 3-inch tablet, any trichlor 3-inch tablet, the rule of thumb is 5,000 gallons, 1 3-inch tablet, 2 times a week. So let's talk about how do you take care of your swimming pool. Well, we recommend on Sunday night, you go out and you're going to test, of course, for 3 things. You're going to test for the alkalinity, You're going to test for the pH and you test for chlorine. So let's, for argument's sake, say this is a 15,000 gallon pool. So you go out on Sunday night, you test the water. The alkalinity is fine, the pH is fine, which is normal for those things to stay balanced, but the chlorine level is low. Well, if it's one 3-inch tablet per 5,000 gallons, you're going to add 3 3-inch tablets to the skimmer and let them dissolve. And you're going to let that go. Now, on Sunday nights, we recommend, just as habit, shock the pool. Now, this is a 1 pound bag of shock. We recommend 1 pound per 10,000 gallons 1 time a week. So we recommend on Sunday night, test the alkalinity, test the pH, add your chlorine tablets, and add 1 pound per 10,000 gallons of the shock. And basically you're finished. That's it. So now, Sunday you're finished. Everything's fine, you put your chlorine in, you've shocked the pool. You go out on Wednesday and you test the pool. Again, you're going to test for alkalinity, pH, and chlorine. So again, the alkalinity is fine, the pH is fine, the chlorine level is fine. What should you add? Well, 3 more 3-inch tablets, because that worked. Well, let's say you had tested the water, the alkalinity is fine, the pH is fine, and the chlorine level is low. Well, now instead of adding 3 3-inch tablets, add 4. Because many things affect chlorine use. If that's not enough, just simply add. Let's say you go out and you test for chlorine, and the chlorine level is high. Well, then instead of adding 3 3-inch tablets, just add 2. What is going on here is that your chlorine level will change from a lot of factors. And what you have to simply do is get a moving average. So if it's averages 3 tablets 2 times a week, that's great. Your pool may average 4 tablets or 2 tablets. It's simply a matter of a lot of factors. So let's talk about some of those factors and why I can't tell you exactly how many chlorine tablets you should use for your pool. Now keep in mind, I started out as a swimmer, a competitive swimmer, when I was about 6 years old. I went to high school swimming. I went to college on a swimming scholarship, and the job for my whole adult life has been taking care of swimming pools. And I can't tell you how many tablets exactly your pool is going to use, because there's so many factors that impact it. The first and the biggest factor that's going to impact your chlorine use is rainwater. Every time it rains, you're adding lots of fresh water. Remember when we talked earlier, we said, well, if you put a lot of salt in this water, how would you lower the concentration? Well, the easiest way, we said, was simply to raise the water level, add fresh water. Well, that happens every time it rains. You get fresh water in the pool that has no chlorine, and that lowers the level of chlorine in your pool. It lowers that concentration. So that will impact your chlorine use. The second major thing that impacts chlorine use is temperature. As the water temperature comes up, as it gets into the summer, it gets hot outside, the water temperature comes up. Well, as that water temperature comes up, there are more things growing in the water which impact the chlorine, and the chlorine becomes more active. There's more going on, and so it breaks down faster. So rainwater, the water temperature. There's also, number 3 would be bather load. How many people are using the pool, and how many times a week are they using it? How often is the pool being used? Because remember, chlorine attacks things, so it will combine onto your skin, and when you get out of the pool, you're taking it with you. So for example, if you have the Cub Scouts come over on Saturday morning, all 30 or 40 of them, they're going to use a lot of chlorine. In fact, sometimes that chlorine has to attack other things after the Cub Scouts have been there. You know, number 4, pollen, dirt, dust, debris from the air. Do you live next to a farmer who's plowing his fields and that's putting dirt and dust or things like that into the water? That impacts chlorine use. So anything that goes into the water is going to impact your chlorine use, whether it be rainwater, temperature, pollen, dust. Those things are going to affect your chlorine use. And one of the biggest ones is sunlight. Now, we have to go back to 2nd grade. In the 2nd grade, you had this thing called evaporation. You did an experiment where you put a glass of water on the windowsill. And sure enough, after a few days, the water went down. And your 2nd grade teacher said, well, that's evaporation. Well, what is evaporation? Evaporation is when you're taking a chemical that's naturally a gas and let it go up into the atmosphere. Well, in this case, hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen and oxygen are both gases. They go away, they go up into the atmosphere, and the water level is less. Now, why is that important? Because chlorine in its natural state is a gas. So when it's impacted by sunlight, namely ultraviolet light, that chlorine will turn into a gas and it goes away. Now, to prevent that, there is a product called conditioner. Now, what conditioner does, and it says it right on the label, is it prevents chlorine loss due to sunlight. It keeps the chlorine locked into the water. Now, conditioner is actually a once-a-year treatment. You only treat the water one time a year. If it's an exceptionally hot summer, you might have to add some in July or August because you've had to top up your water periodically from splashing and evaporation. Conditioner helps to hold the chlorine in the water so it doesn't evaporate. Now, we recommend that you have your water professionally tested 2 times a year, once in the spring and once in July or August. In the spring, so that you know exactly how much conditioner to add. And then in August, because you may have to add some more. The reason we recommend you have it tested professionally is too much conditioner is actually bad for the pool. What happens is it slows the chlorine down and keeps it from reacting as quickly as it should. Too little conditioner and you're wasting your chlorine, it's evaporating. Too much conditioner and you have problems with the chlorine actually working. So 2 times a year, take your water to your local pool store or to the family leisure store and have your water tested for conditioner. One thing I should mention about conditioner is it's very difficult to get the conditioner to dissolve. If you're on a sand filter, we recommend that you dissolve the conditioner into a bucket of hot water before pouring it into the skimmer. Now, if you're on an element system, a cartridge filter, then you can literally just dump this right into the skimmer and let it dissolve in the filter. Again, remember, anything granular or tablet goes into the skimmer. Now, let's think about this for a second. You're going to go out every Sunday and Wednesday. You're going to go out and you're going to test the water. Test for alkalinity, test for pH, test for chlorine, and add your chlorine tablets, adjust pH and alkalinity if needed, and every Sunday night, shock the pool. Sunday, Wednesday. Sunday, Wednesday. Sunday, Wednesday. Every Sunday, Wednesday. How many people really can live their life based on that swimming pool where they're going to go out every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Sunday, every Wednesday? That just isn't the way our lives are. Cub Scout meeting on Wednesday night. Oh, you forgot. Or whatever the reason is, you're just not going to do it every Sunday and Wednesday. It just won't happen. That's why we recommend algicide. Now, this particular algicide is copper algicide. Again, there's a dosage amount. In copper algicide, usually 2 ounces per 10,000 gallons once every 2 weeks. Algicide is very, very stable. Unlike chlorine, it does not combine up. It stays in the water. Now, what algicide does is its presence in the water inhibits the growth of algae. It just keeps it from growing by not letting it feed. So algicide will keep your water clear simply by being in the water. So let's say you have Sunday and Wednesday and Sunday and Wednesday and you forget a Wednesday. If you have some algicide in the water, your pool won't grow algae. It will stay clear. So I recommend some copper algicide every 2 weeks as kind of your insurance policy. So let's recap. Sunday, Wednesday, test alkalinity, test pH, test chlorine. Adjust alkalinity if necessary, adjust pH if necessary, add chlorine tablets. On Sunday nights, 1 time a week, shock the pool. And every 2 weeks, add algicide per the instructions to be an insurance policy so that you don't ever get algae. So that's the simple version of pool school, the basic version. How to take care of the pool without a lot of the other things going on. Now, this is only to take care of your pool with chlorine. Now, we have many, many alternative programs besides chlorine that we're going to talk about here in just a second. But remember, if you want more information about algicides, about chlorine, about pH, and about alkalinity, please go to the Advanced Pool School for more information there. So, chlorine is an inexpensive way to take care of your swimming pool. Unfortunately, it requires more time than most of us are willing to spend, but it is inexpensive. Now there are many programs out there to cut back on the amount of time. These are generally low chlor or non-chlorine systems, and they can be a lot less time, but unfortunately a lot more money. And that's really the trade-off for you to decide. Is it about how much time or how much money? To give you an idea, a chlorine summer should not cost on a normal pool more than about $250, $275 for a summer. Some of these alternative programs can be as high as $600 for a single season. So they're very expensive. Now at Family Leisure, the alternatives we carry to chlorine systems are also very simple and easy. In fact, testing the water sometimes as little as every 2 weeks, but they will never be more than $300 or even $350 for a summer. Again, we want your pool to be simple, easy, and inexpensive. Now, as you look at some of these chlorine or non-chlorine programs or low chlorine programs, they will always have 3 basic ingredients. And really those ingredients should be looked at to compare one program to another. All of them will include an algicide, some type of way of killing algae. They will also include a bacteriostat, a way of sterilizing the water, killing bacteria and other things. They will also include a shock. The shock is designed to burn out the contaminants created by the other 2. So all of these programs will incorporate those 3. Now, in some cases, that shock that we were just talking about will be a chlorine shock. Sometimes it's even hydrogen peroxide, which is a very strong sanitizing agent, but does some strange things to the water. All of these programs will incorporate those 3 basic ingredients, and that's really the basis for how you should look at the program or evaluate the program. You know, what is it using as an algicide? What is it using to kill bacteria? And what is it using for shock? For the past 15 years at Family Leisure, our most popular chlorine alternative program is actually a low chlor system. It's called Aqua Smarte, and it's a natural mineral system. What that means is inside of this chamber, there are natural minerals that serve as both an algicide and as a bacteriostat, killing bacteria and algae. What happens is, as the water flows through the cycler, it flows through these mineral chambers and over those minerals, purifying the water, much the same way as an underground stream running over the artesian minerals purifies that stream water. This is working exactly the same way. So this is installed in the cycler. Now, what happens now is this is a once-a-year treatment. Every spring, you install the new mineral system, and it will be good for the whole summer. You don't even have to test for it. Those natural minerals are going to do 80% of the work that your pool needs to keep it clear and clean and sparkling. Now, the second component to this system is actually chlorine. Now, this is a low chlorine system. These are very slow dissolving chlorine tablets, and they are installed into the cycler as well. This simply drops in here. Now as the water is running through, it's running through the minerals, doing 80% of the work. It's running through the chlorine, the slow dissolved chlorine tablets, which is doing the other 20%. This system is called a low chlor system because normally on your test strips, you will try to maintain about 3 parts per million on the test strip. With this system, 0.5 to 1 is all the level you need to maintain. That's about 70% less. So with a mineral system and a backpack in there, the water is being cleared and sterilized and sanitized. Now, these backpacks will last up to 2 weeks, depending on your pool size and some of the other factors we talked about in basic pool school. So now you have a system that has very low chlorine. That low chlorine means the water will be softer, the bathing suits won't fade as much, the water is easier on all your pool equipment because you don't have the harsh chlorine in there. And because you're not having to touch the chlorine, you only have to change these tablets or these chambers about every 2 weeks. You have something that doesn't require a lot of work. Simply install the chamber, install the mineral system, and you're good. You're ready to go for about every 10 days, 2 weeks, even 2.5 weeks, depending on your pool size and the other factors. Now, it is still necessary to shock your pool. Now, we recommend Blast, which is potassium monopersulfate. Potassium monopersulfate shocks should be used 1 pound per 10,000 gallons, just like in the chlorine program. And what that does, that shock burns out the contaminants that the algicide and the bacteriostat have already killed. So this is again a very simple and easy but inexpensive way to take care of your pool because you're using 50% less chlorine. Now, as in all programs, I always recommend that you have some type of an insurance policy in case something goes wrong. Now in this particular case, with the Aqua Smarte system, what I recommend is natural chemistry. Natural chemistry products are all natural, as the name implies. And really there's 2 chemicals I want to recommend for this program. The first is called Phosphorine. Phosphorine is designed to remove phosphates from the water. Now for those of you who are old enough to remember, back in the 60s and 70s, we had a real problem in America with algae blooms, or islands of algae clogging up lakes and rivers and streams. Well, it was determined that phosphates from the laundry detergents that we were using, to make the clothes whiter and brighter, well, those phosphates were going into our water supply, into our rivers and lakes, and the algae was feeding on those phosphates. Well, once they removed the phosphates from laundry detergents, the phosphates were removed from the rivers and streams and the algae blooms went away. Algae needs phosphates to grow. Well, the same thing is true with your swimming pool. If you add phosphorine to the water, 1 liter for pools 15, 18, or 24 foot in size, or 2 liters for pools 27, 30, or even 33 feet in size, it will remove all the phosphates from the water. Now the water may turn cloudy for 12 hours or something like that as it removes the phosphates. But what happens is, once it's removed the phosphates, algae cannot grow. It can't even get started. It's sort of like if you took the battery out of your car. Well, without the battery in your car, it won't start. Without phosphates in the water, algae can't begin. The second product is called Pool Perfect. Now, Pool Perfect is a natural enzyme. Actually, you could drink this stuff, it's so natural. What natural enzymes do is they eat oils, all types of oils. Actually, when they cleaned up the Exxon Valdez oil slick, what they used is natural enzymes to clear that water, to eat those enzymes off the surface of the water. Now, the reason that's so important is, what do we all do when we have the kids go swimming? We lather them up with sunscreen or sunblock or suntan lotion of some sort, and those are all oils. So when the children go swimming, that oil comes off, goes into the water, and it forms a very thin oil slick on the surface of the water. Well, then when dust and dirt or any other type of airborne debris hits that water, it coagulates in the oil. The oil traps it, and then it gets sucked out to the sides of your pool. And it forms a nasty black scum line around the side of the pool that's very hard to clean off or to scrub off. Pool Perfect, those natural enzymes eat those oils, so your water is always sparkling and clean, and you don't get that scum line on the side. So the program is really pretty simple. You install the new mineral system, and then you add the phosphorine, either 1 liter or 2 liter, depending on the size of your pool. Then every 2 weeks, add a product called Pool Perfect, like this, but Pool Perfect plus phosphorine. So now what's going to happen is every 2 weeks, you're going to add 1 capful per 8,000 gallons of your swimming pool. So if you're a 15,000 gallon pool, like a 2452, a 15,000 gallon pool, every 2 weeks you'll add 2 capfuls of Pool Perfect phosphorine. What that's going to do is that's going to take phosphates out of the water that may have come in when you added fresh water. It's also going to eat the enzyme, use the enzymes to eat the oil off the surface of the pool. So your water stays crystal clear. So what makes the Aqua Smarte program especially attractive to customers is, if this program is followed exactly, if you follow this program, it comes with an absolutely unconditional algae-free guarantee. If you follow this program the way it's been laid out here on the pool school, you will absolutely never have algae, ever. In fact, Family Leisure is so confident of that, as is the Aqua Smarte company, we will absolutely guarantee that you will not get algae. If for some reason you ever got algae and you are following this program, we will pay and provide all chemicals, any and all chemicals that are necessary to clear your pool from green to clean. It's free. That's a guarantee. The Aqua Smarte system is simple, easy, inexpensive, and it has a guarantee to never get algae. Let's look at the program in a step-by-step manner. First of all, every spring you will install a new natural mineral reservoir. This goes in, it's once a year treatment, it's good for the whole summer, you do not have to test it, and that is doing the majority of the work. At the beginning of the year, you're going to add phos-free to eliminate the phosphates in the water so that you're not going to have any issues with algae formation as your insurance policy. Then you're going to install one backpack into the cycler. That will add small amounts of chlorine to your pool. That amount is registered or controlled by controlling the flow on this dial. And what you're going to try to maintain is 0.5 to 1 parts per million on the test strips. That's the whole program except for the added insurance policy of the Pool Perfect plus phos-free. The Pool Perfect plus phos-free is a clarifier that eats oils and adds small amounts of phosphate remover to the water so that you don't ever get algae formation, the water stays crystal clear. And finally, as in all programs that use some type of a chlorine residual, shock the pool every week with 1 pound per 10,000 gallons. As you can see, the Aqua Smarte system is very simple. It's very easy and it's inexpensive. The Perma Salt system is redefining the traditional salt system here in America. Because the Perma Salt system is not a chlorine generating system, it doesn't have the corrosion problems that traditional salt systems have. What the Perma Salt system is simply the most effective, easiest program out there on the market today. Let me describe a whole summer of how you take care of your pool in a step-by-step manner, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about all the components and how they work. Well, first of all, if this is a new pool and the water is filling, you're going to want to add a product called Generate. Now, if this is a pool being installed by your family leisure installation crews, they will add the Generate for you. And what Generate is simply a algicide, a non-copper algicide, to protect the water while it's filling and until the copper can come up to level. So it's just a protection on new pools only. If this is an existing pool, you don't need Generate. After the pool is full, the water is circulating, the ionizing power, the Perma Salt system is hooked up, then you're going to add 2 bags of salt. Now this is salt that's going to help soften the water, add some TDS. 2 bags of salt, no matter what size pool it is. Then you're going to add the full bucket of Perma Salt, all 25 pounds. The salt you're going to pour right into the water and stir it up with your brush. The Perma Salt you're going to pour into the skimmer. Now all 25 pounds go into that skimmer. Just pour it in slowly. As it goes in, it will dissolve. Next, you're going to take the Perma Salt system itself and you're going to adjust the dial all the way up. What that's going to do is to add more copper quicker to the water. After about 2 or 3 days, you'll be able to test the water. You test it for the copper, and when that copper level is up, you'll be able to adjust the dial down based on your test strips. You really want to keep the copper level at about 0.3 parts per million on the test strip. But you'll be able to dial that down as the copper level comes up. That's it for preparing the water. After that, every 2 weeks, you're going to add a bottle of what's called Clarate. Now, Clarate is a water clarifier designed to keep the water clean. That's all, clear. Keep the water sparkling, and it's every 2 weeks. It's a natural enzyme. The other product is Activate. Pre-measured 1 pound bag, and this is a dichloroxone blend shock called Activate. Very, very powerful shock, and on a normal pool, it's only needed every 2 weeks. So that's really the whole system. You adjust the program, you adjust the copper level on the chamber. Every 2 weeks, 1 bag of Activate, one bottle of Clarate. Now on larger pools like 30 or 33 foot or even 36 foot pools, I probably recommend that you add an extra bag of Activate every other week. So really you'll be adding a bag of Activate every week. And that's simply because the pool size is so large, you don't want to ever get into a problem. Even on smaller pools, if you ever feel a film on the side of the pool or see a little cloudy water, just add another bag of Activate. But that's the whole system. So for 16 weeks, if you have a 16-week summer, you're really only testing your water 8 times. You still have to test for pH and alkalinity, but the Perma Salt system generally buffers the water, so you really don't have a whole lot of fluctuations other than due to rain or excess, rainwater with pollution. But really, it's really simple. Test for the copper, alkalinity, and pH, 1 bottle of Chlorate, 1 bottle of Activate. And that is as simple a program as you can do. Now let's talk for a second about what the individual components actually do. I told you that Generate is a non-copper algicide, and it's really a once-in-a-lifetime treatment. The Aqua Salt, or the salt that you're putting in, what that is doing is not preparing for chlorine generation as in a typical salt system. This salt is going in, number one, to raise the TDS level. That's the total dissolved solids in the water. By raising the TDS level, the ionized copper can move through the water a little easier. Now, after the TDS level has come up, you'll never ever add salt again. This is not something that you're going to add every year or ever again. You never test for it. The second thing that the salt does is actually softens the water. Salt water is a water softener, and so your water feels a little better. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime treatment also. So once it's been added, you'll never use that again. The Preparate, on the other hand, is a once-a-year treatment. Preparate has lots and lots of things in it. First of all, it has sodium tetraborate. The borates are carbon dioxide removers. Now, I don't know if you remember from your high school chemistry, but all plants, algae included, takes carbon dioxide, performs photosynthesis, and the byproduct is oxygen. Well, sodium tetraborate removes carbon dioxide from the water. Well, by removing the carbon dioxide from the water, it eliminates the way that algae would breathe. So it kind of suffocates the algae, makes sure that algae never grows. So sodium tetraborate, number one, is a great algicide because it keeps the algae from breathing. Second thing that's in here is mineral removers. Keep in mind, this is a preparate. This is a preparing treatment. So there is going to be minerals in your water when you first fill it that you want to have removed so that they don't interfere with the copper. The third chemical in the preparate is cyanuric acid. Now, if you remember from basic pool school, we talk about cyanuric acid and that it helps to keep chlorine in the water or prevents it from breaking down due to sunlight. All of that's in the preparate. So what that's going to do is it's going to prepare the water by putting an algicide, sodium tetraborate, cyanuric acid, and mineral movers. That is a once-a-year treatment. Next year, when you fill your pool back up, after you've drained it in the winter and you fill it back up, you will need to retreat the pool. Now let's talk about the real guts of the system. This is the Perma Salt system. And what it is doing is it's taking copper bars and ionizing that copper. Ionized copper is much faster and more effective than all the other copper treatments that are out there. In basic pool school, we talked about copper algicide. There's a lot of other copper-based water chemicals out there, without naming any names, that are encapsulated copper. Well, that encapsulation slows them down and limits their effectiveness. This is ionized copper. It's very powerful, very effective. One of the things I'm sure everybody always heard, throw coins in fountains and in wells. Well, that process was started back in the days of the Egyptians and the Romans, and they would use copper coins. They would throw them into the wells because that copper, as it disintegrated, purified the water. It sterilized the water. Both copper and silver have those properties. So it protected the water. It protected the well. This is taking that same type of idea and controlling it by putting an electric charge to it. So the more electricity to the copper, the faster it's going to dissipate into the water. The less, and that's what you're controlling with the dial, the lower the copper level, so that you can absolutely maintain an ideal copper level. Again, you never want to have your copper too high. As I said in basic pool school, too much chlorine is okay, too much copper isn't. And that's really the system. You prepare the water with the preparate. Now you're controlling ionized copper at the controller unit. Now Chlorate is a natural enzyme. Now what natural enzymes do is they actually eat oils. We talked about natural chemistry has a natural enzyme. This is a natural enzyme. It's actually considered to be more powerful, very, very effective, and it eats the oils on the surface of the pool. So again, this clarifier is only used every 2 weeks. It's a natural clarifier. So the combination of all of these things is basically that you're not dependent on any one system. This is not entirely a copper-based system because you're still adding copper or chlorine. You're not entirely a chlorine-based system because you're using copper, using sodium tetraborate. You're also using natural minerals, potassium monopersulfate. It is a holistic approach to water chemistry, and it's the synergy of all of these products that makes it so simple and easy. And that's really what it comes down to. It's simple and easy. And, my definition of what's important, it's simple, easy, and it's inexpensive. This chamber, the actual chamber itself, lasts about 1 season. Generally 1 season on a normal size pool. Larger pools, it can be a little less. It depends on where you live. Our stores in Minnesota, it can last 2 seasons. Stores in San Antonio, 1 year is about all that they get. But it's good for 1 year. So what are you buying? Once a year, buying a replacement chamber, just this section right here. Once a year, a bottle of preparate. 8 bottles of chlorate. Costs more than $450 for a whole summer. And you're only touching your pool every 2 weeks. Meets all of my definitions of simple, easy, and inexpensive. We've talked about how to treat the water chemically, to kill the algae and bacteria and other contaminants that may be in the water. The next thing that we have to talk about is filtration. How do we remove those contaminants from the water? There are 2 basic types of filters, sand filters and element filters. First, we're going to talk about sand filters. This is a sand filter. Actually, this is a cutaway of a sand filter. The way a sand filter works is water comes out of the skimmer on the side of the pool, comes into the pump. The pump pumps water up into the valve head and down into the filter tank. To help you visualize that, this valve head here is spraying the water out over the sand. Now, the sand is only filled up about halfway, so that the water can spray over the surface of the sand. So the water sprays over the surface of the sand, and then the water runs through the sand and is collected by the little fingers down at the bottom of the system. Well, those fingers collect the water, but they don't let any dirt through. So now what's happening is the water comes through the valve head, through the sand. The sand captures the dirt. Then the water is pumped back through this standpipe, back up through the valve head, and then back into the pool. It's a very, very simple system. Because it's so simple, a lot of people get confused and it can cause some problems. Let me explain why. The way a sand filter works, when it's in the filter position, water is coming down into the sand. Well, the sand traps the dirt on the surface. The top 1, 2, or even 3 inches of dirt is where all the dirt is trapped. Well, as that dirt gets trapped up here, it starts to cake. Well, what that does is starts to pack the sand together. It's getting really dirty and nasty and it gets caked. Well, as it's doing that, the pump is still pumping like crazy. It doesn't realize that the water isn't going through the filter very well. And so what happens is that dirt gets caked in the sand gets packed tighter and tighter and tighter, and pressure builds up. There's a little pressure gauge up on top that says there's more pressure building up on top of the sand. Well, most people think, well, if the pressure gets up, my filter is dirty, then it's time to backwash. Let me explain what backwashing is. Backwashing is you move the valve head from the filter position to the backwash position. And what happens is now, instead of the water flowing from the top and through the sand, the water is gurgling up from underneath. It's coming through those lateral assemblies and it's coming up through the sand. Well, that stirs the sand around and it cleans it. And then the dirty water comes out the side port over here. On this filter, it's coming out the back. And what's happening now is dirty water is being pumped out. With your kit, you will get a backwash hose to direct that water. Now, I always recommend that you direct that dirty water to your neighbor's yard. I'm just teasing. But really, it is dirty water. And you can see that dirty water is coming out of there. So it's stirring the sand up and it's flushing all of the dirt out and it's pumping it out. Well, after you've done that for usually about 2 or 2.5 minutes, unplug the filter system, unplug it, and now you can move the valve head. Well, first of all, you want to move it back to what's called the rinse position. What happens in the rinse position is the water comes down through the valve head, through the sand, but it still goes out through the backwash port. What that means is water is going through the sand and it's seeding the sand back down. Remember, during backwash it's stirred up. It's seeding that sand back down so it's ready to start filtering again, but it's not pumping the water back to the pool. The reason that's important is if you went straight from backwash to filter, the water would go down from the valve head, but it would run right through the sand because the sand would be loose, not packed. And dirty water would go into your pool for about 15 or 20 seconds. So normally you run the filter on the filter position, that's filtering the water. When the filter gets dirty, up here, the pressure is building up, time to backwash. Well, then you move it to the backwash position for about 2 minutes. After you've backwashed for 2 or 2.5 minutes, move it to the rinse position and that reseats the sand. Again, then move it back to the filter position. One thing I always like to remind people, always unplug the pump before changing filter positions. It's sort of like putting in the clutch before shifting gears. You don't want to just spin that with the pump running in full gear so that you don't hurt any of the O-rings inside of the valve head. Okay, so filter, dirty water is building up on the top, dirt is building up on the top of the sand, backwash stirs it up, rinse reseats the sand. So what's the inherent problem? Well, the inherent problem is people generally backwash too often. They see that that gauge says, well, it's up 8, 10 pounds pressure, but my filter must be getting dirty. I must clean, it's time to clean my filter. Well, maybe or maybe not. See, the problem is sand filters filter better when they're dirty. They don't filter as well when they're clean. Let me explain why. After you've backwashed and you've seeded the sand and you move it back to the filter position, you plug the pump back in and that pump is running like crazy and water is coming back through the filter. There's water coming back into the return like the rooster tail behind a jet ski. It's just pumping water like crazy. And people think, oh, that's great, it's really circulating water. Well, that's what it looks like, it's circulating a lot of water. But what it means if it's circulating that much water is that it's not filtering. The water is running through the sand with hardly any resistance. What happens is as the filter gets dirty and it packs the sand tighter and tighter, it starts to filter finer and finer particles. Sand filters, right after backwashing, may only be filtering at about 18 to 20 microns. After the filter gets dirty, it can get down as low as 8, 10, or even 12 microns of how small a particle it's picking up. So sand filters filter best when they're dirty. I get the call all the time, and they'll say, Mike, my filter's broke. And I say, oh, okay, well, what's the matter with it? And they say, well, it's not keeping the water good and clean. And I say, well, is it pumping water? Yes. Okay, does it have sand in the filter? Yes. Is it leaking anywhere? No. So it's pumping water, it's going through the sand, and it's going back into the pool. Well, your filter's fine. It's doing everything it's supposed to do. And then I'll ask a trick question. Are you backwashing the filter all the time to keep it good and clean, keep your sand good and clean? And invariably they'll say, yes, I've been backwashing almost every day. Well, that's the problem. Sand filters only filter effectively when they're dirty. Only backwash the pool, and I tell people, the gauge comes from the manufacturer and that's wonderful, but my recommendation is ignore the gauge. Only backwash your filter when the water coming back into the pool has slowed down to a trickle. Well, now you're not processing enough water. When that water slows down to a trickle, you're not processing enough water. It's time to backwash. Not before. If you backwash too often, your water will gradually get cloudy and you won't understand, and you'll start adding a lot of chemicals, and really it's just because you're backwashing your sand filter too often. Sand filters filter better when they're dirty. Now the other three positions on the sand filter, we have filter, you have backwash, you have rinse. There are three other positions on the filter that really aren't that important. Closed position. Well, if you're going to do something with your pump, you can move the valve head to the closed position and it keeps water from coming back in. There's a recirculate position. On recirculate, water comes through the pump, goes through the valve head and back to the pool, but doesn't go through the filter. Well, why circulate water and not clean it? It makes no sense. So I've never ever used the recirculate position. The last position, winterize, is really just to keep your valve head from freezing, and I recommend taking the valve head inside during the winter time to keep it from freezing. Finally, there is pump to waste. Now, pump to waste is a position that a lot of people use in the springtime. Basically, unplug the pump, move it to pump to waste. Now what's happening is the water's coming into the pump, it's going to the valve head, but it's being pumped out of the backwash port. So water is coming in, but it's bypassing the filter and it's running over towards your neighbor's yard. What can happen is if the cover comes off in the wintertime, or I hate to say you forgot to cover or didn't cover it, and you got a lot of bugs or leaves, or just your pool is just really dirty and you want to just pump it down really fast. You can never drain a pool. Don't misunderstand. When I say pump it down, you're going to lose maybe 2 or 3 inches of water as you vacuum the pool, sucking the dirt and debris out of the pool and over towards your neighbor's yard. Now, I'm just kidding on that neighbor thing. But pump to waste allows you to suck water from the bottom of the pool, vacuuming, and out. And so it can be a good position to use every once in a while, especially if your pool ever gets really dirty, it's been let go, or in the springtime. Just pump to waste, pump it all out, put some fresh water back in, and you're good. So that's the way a sand filter works. Water comes in, runs through the sand traps the dirt, water gets pumped back to the pool. You backwash it to clean it, rinse it to reseat it, and the other position that you might want to consider using is pump to waste if you're just going to pump a lot of water out. Now, one thing I should mention, whenever a sand filter is very new, because it's very clean, or you've just backwashed it, that pump is pumping very effectively. And so it's moving an awful lot of water. Remember I said the water coming back in looks like the rooster tail behind a jet ski? Okay, well what that means is water is coming through very well. The problem is sometimes these skimmers cannot process as much water as that pump wants. Well, when that happens, inside of that skimmer, a little whirlpool will form. And what happens to that little whirlpool is it will start sucking air, just like it's a miniature tornado made out of water. And that tornado will suck air, and it'll suck air all the way down to the pump. Well, when the pump gets air in it, it's called losing prime. And what will happen is the pump just simply stops pumping. It has a little air in it, it just stops pumping. So what will happen is you'll think, oh, my pump's not working. It's plugged in, it's running, but no water circulating. If you look in the lid here, you'll probably see air. You look there and you say, well, nothing's happening. The whirlpool goes away. After it's lost prime here, the whirlpool goes away, so you didn't see it happen. All you know, it's not working. What you do is simply, again, unplug the pump, open this lid, and just crack it for a second. A little water will gush out, and that will reprime the pump. Close it back down and plug it in. Now, if you ever have this happen continuously, where it's happening all the time, chances are your water level is low. But there's a trick to make things easier. If you're losing prime often, just take a tennis ball, just a regular tennis ball, and drop it into the skimmer. What will happen is now as that whirlpool starts to form, the tennis ball will get sucked to the vortex of that whirlpool, and that won't let the air get pulled down into the pump. So that'll allow you, as you're filling the pool with a little bit more water, to keep circulating without losing prime. So just a regular old tennis ball in the skimmer can eliminate the problem. So that's sand filtration. These are great filters. Sand filters have been the most popular filters for residential and commercial pools for probably about 50 or 60 years, and they work wonderfully. One word of caution, sand filters filter better when they're dirty. Next, we'll talk about element filtration. In the last 10 or 15 years, element filters have become much more popular. And the reason that is first of all, it started in the early 90s, mid-90s. California suffered some severe droughts. Lots of people in California had swimming pools, but they had a problem. Sand filters require backwashing to clean them. What that means is, on a sand filter, is you backwash the filter, and it takes dirty water and cleans the filter and blows dirty water out of the pool. Well, that was wasting water at a time when California didn't need to waste water. So they kind of outlawed or made it against the rules to have sand filters because they wasted so much water. In the process, they developed element filters. Now, in the old days, in the early days of pools, element filters were very popular. They were also why pools got a reputation for being hard to take care of. The old elements were about this big and about that big around, and you had to clean it pretty much every day. There are still some pools out there that use the old element systems. The old style, very small. This is a 150 square feet element filter. Now, to give that some comparison, a 30-inch sand filter, 30-inch round sand filter, filters with about 9 square feet of surface area. And then as the sand gets dirty, it cakes up, but it's really filtering with about 9 square feet. This is 150 square feet. A filter like this can go perhaps all summer on a normal sized pool. It'll have to be cleaned one time. And that will vary from pool to pool, of course, depending on how much dirt, how much dust, how well you take care of your pool. But these filters filter really, really fine particles. And the advantage to an element filter is it always filters fine particles. Sand filters only filter well when they're dirty. Element filters filter the same all the time. It's very much the same as your oil filter in your car or your air filter in your car. It's a polyester element, and it filters at about 6 to 8 microns all the time. You know, to put that into comparison, a sand filter, when it's dirty, filters at about 20 microns until, when it's clean, it's about 20 microns. When it's dirty, it gets down into that 8 to 10 microns. This is as low as 6 and 8 microns on a normal element. So let me show you how this works. The water comes from the skimmer down to the front of the pump. This is the hair and leaf pot. It's being circulated through the pump, and it goes into the filter. What happens at this point is the water is coming into this big vessel, and then the water comes through the filter where it's being filtered, collected, and then pumped back into the pool via the return jet. This is the actual filter itself. So let me tell you one of the things to be cautious of. When this filter is very, very new or very, very clean, the water runs through that filter very easily. So a little pressure gauge up here on the top may say 0 pressure, but that doesn't mean that water isn't circulating. What you do is you look at where the water is coming back into the pool. If water is coming back into the pool, then everything is working just fine. Now, as the filter gets dirty, that pressure gauge will tend to climb just a little bit. What I always recommend, though, is don't really pay too much attention to that gauge. Look at the water coming back into the pool. If the water coming back into the pool is still circulating fairly well, it's not necessary to clean the filter. Now, the way that you clean these filters is really, you don't want to use a high pressure washer, but any type of a pressure wand, and we actually sell a very nice pressure wand, or go to the car wash, and what you do is you pressure wash it from the inside out. That blows the dirt kind of out of the filter, and then you pressure wash it like this, squirting the pleats out and brushing them out. That will clean the filter. If at any time you say, well, you know, the filter's probably old, they're not very expensive to replace, but you can bring a filter back to life using diluted muriatic acid in a scrub bucket. What I'd recommend before you do that is call your family leisure or check with the frequently asked questions on how to clean an element filter. But generally an element filter will go with one cleaning, maybe no cleanings, all summer long, depending on your pool, how much dust and dirt it gets. Now, one thing that can cause a little bit of a problem with is when an element filter is brand new, it is filtering very, 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 very efficiently, and that pump is sucking a lot of water. All right, well, that water has to come from this skimmer. Well, the problem with that is sometimes the skimmer cannot deliver as much water as the pump is trying to suck. And so what will happen is a little whirlpool will form inside of the skimmer. That whirlpool will form, looks like a tornado, kind of an inverted tornado. That whirlpool will form and it'll suck air all the way back to this pump. Now, when that happens and air gets into the pump loses prime. Well, to fix that, you unplug it, crack the lid just a little bit, just crack it for a second, that'll reprime it. Now, on element systems, you can actually leave the filter run and simply take the bleed valve up here. That will bleed any air in the system out, and that will also reprime the pump. So if you ever lose prime on an element system, crack the lid is the traditional method, or bleed the air off up here. Now, if you notice this is happening over and over again, then chances are your water level is too low. You're trying to suck more water than the pump can deliver or than the skimmer can deliver. I always recommend that the water level be above this second screw, actually somewhere between the second screw and the top of the skimmer. If your water level is low and you start to lose prime like that, or if the filter is brand new and you're losing prime, there's a cheating trick. It's called a tennis ball. Just drop the tennis ball into the skimmer. Well, what would happen is, as that whirlpool starts to form, the tennis ball gets sucked to the vortex of the whirlpool, and the air can't be sucked down into the pump. Well, if the air doesn't go down into the pump, you won't lose prime. It's just an old trick. If you start seeing a whirlpool or you start losing prime consistently, just put a tennis ball in the skimmer. Element filter is very, very simple. You basically turn it on. In the springtime, you can turn it on and just run it about 12 hours a day. Once you get into that 85 degrees or maybe 75 degree water temperatures, 72 degree water temperatures, 85 or 90 degree outdoor temperatures, just let it run 24/7. If the water ever coming back into the pool slows down to a trickle, it's time to clean the element. Element's clean just by pressure washing the inside and the outside, and you're good to go. Put it back in, off and running. Element filters are simple, easy, and effective. Okay, so we've talked about how to take care of your pool using the water chemicals, whether it be Chlorine, Aqua Smarte, or even the Perma Salt system. And all three of those programs were very simple and easy. Then we talked about filtration. We talked about sand filters and element filters, and those were very simple and easy. Now we're going to talk about that part of taking care of your pool that is not simple and easy. Now, a long time ago, I used to think that if you had teenagers, you'd have greatest of all of God's gifts, someone to vacuum your pool for you. Well, then my children got to be teenagers, and it didn't work that way. So I have an automatic pool sweep. And we'll talk about how to hook up and use an automatic pool sweep in the next section. But right now, let's talk about how to use the manual pool sweep that comes with your pool package. Now, the first thing to remember is vacuuming a pool is an exercise in patience. And I mean that in every sense of the word. It's an exercise in patience. So first of all, let's talk about how you minimize vacuuming the pool. Well, the first thing to remember is this return jet on the side of the pool. Now, this jet is where the water comes back into the pool after it's been filtered. And that water comes back with a lot of force. It comes through pretty well. So if you can aim that eyeball where the water is going down and to the right, what you'll do is you'll get that whole body of water spinning. Now, the more you can get that body of water spinning, the water will actually sweep the dirt, very much like a commode, into the center. It'll sweep that dirt into a small spot in the center of the pool. Well, then when you vacuum the pool, you're really only vacuuming a small spot in the center. Brush the other stuff off a little bit, but you're just vacuuming a very small spot. And that's important because that'll save you a lot of time. And as I said, vacuuming is an exercise in patience. So let's talk about how you hook up your manual pool sweep. First of all, this is the vacuum head that comes with your pool package and the vacuum pole. That pole will just slide down onto this vacuum head and attach. Now these poles can extend up to 16 feet just by turning this cam lock and it's separating it out and then locking it back down. I've got it short for obvious reasons for the demonstration. This is the vacuum hose that comes with it. One end will have a swivel mechanism on it. So what you're going to do is hook up the vacuum head to the pole and then put the swivel side of the vacuum hose on the vacuum head. And then you're going to put all of this in the water, just like this. And now at this point, imagine, if you will, that this part of the pool is in the water and I am on the outside of the pool. At this point, you're going to take the skim vac adapter. Now this one comes with an elbow adapter that's only needed if you're going to have a deck around your pool, especially an aluminum walkway type deck, because you don't really need that in most cases. So what you're going to do is you hook up the vacuum head to the pole, put the hose on, and then hook it up to the skim vac adapter. Now the first step, and why this is an exercise in patience, is because this hose is full of air. And if you remember when we talked about the pool pumps, that if you got air into the system, the pump loses prime and it stops pumping. So what would happen if you just took this hose and the skim vac and put it into the skimmer like this? Well, of course, the hose would be full of air. The pump would suck air into the system and the pump would lose prime. So you can't just do that. What you're going to do is you're going to have to prime the hose. So hold the hose over the return jet where the water is coming back into the pool. What that will do is that'll fill this hose with water. The first part of an exercise in patience is when you think that hose is full of water, wait a little bit longer, because it probably isn't. The hose and the vacuum head will actually float up, bubble, and then float back down. But make sure that that hose is full of water, because you're going to slide along in the water, take this up and over, and it's going to suck down into the skimmer. If you've gotten impatient and there's still air in the hose, then that air will get pulled down into the pump will lose prime, and you'll have to start all over. So the first thing to remember is have the patience to make sure that that hose is completely full of water. When you take it over the top, it will get sucked down onto the skimmer, and now the water will be pumped from the bottom of the pool through the skimmer and down into the pump and filter system. So actually you'll be filtering from the bottom of the pool. Now the second step in an exercise in patience is take a look at this vacuum head. Now as you can see, this is not a very sophisticated system. This is a piece of plastic, a weighted head, with some brushes and a hole. Okay, this is not quite as sophisticated as your Kirby or your Hoover or any other type of vacuum for that matter. What's happening here is the brushes stir the dirt up, and then the water being pulled into this hose pulls the dirt back into the filter, and the filter catches it. Okay? So imagine what's happening. It stirs it up. That makes sense. The water gets pulled back, takes the dirt with it. Well, here's the second part of an exercise in patience. I have what we call the Saturday morning pool sweep, or sweeping the pool syndrome. The wife says to the husband, say, honey, will you vacuum the pool? The kids are having people over this afternoon. He says, sure, I'm getting ready to go play golf, no problem. So he goes out there and he starts vacuuming the pool. So he's got it all hooked up and he starts vacuuming the pool like this, right? And he's kind of in a hurry. So he's going pretty fast. Well, he's stirring the dirt up, right? And it looks like everything looks great. Nothing on the ground, on the bottom of the pool. He goes and plays golf, comes home later that night, and his wife says, hey, I thought you were going to vacuum the pool for the kids. And he says, well, I did. And she says, well, look, it's got dirt on the bottom of the pool. Oh, this pool is too much trouble. I just vacuumed the pool. Now I got to do it again. Well, the problem is he really didn't vacuum the pool. He stirred the dirt up in the pool. That's the second part of an exercise in patience. Imagine that if you are brushing the dirt here and you go too fast, what happens is the brushes do stir up the dirt, but the hole has moved on. And so now the dirt is being stirred here. It goes up into the water. It's off the bottom. You think you've cleaned the pool, but all you've done is stirred it up. A few hours later, the dirt settles back down. It's back on the pool bottom, and you think, I just vacuumed this pool. This is too hard. Well, the problem is you're going too fast. So the second part of that patience is take your time. I have a cousin, gets up at 6 o'clock on Saturday mornings, says, oh, Mike, it's so peaceful. You get out there and you just vacuum in the pool, and you're listening to the birds chirp. It's just beautiful. Well, he's practicing Zen in the art of pool maintenance. I can't quite do that, but he's on the right track because he's going slow. He's just vacuuming it slowly, and he's envisioning what's happening, that the brush is stirring the dirt up, the hole is sucking the dirt back and cleaning it up, and he's vacuuming effectively. So the two parts of vacuuming the pool, exercise and patience, is number one, make sure that you prime the hose completely full of water, or you will lose prime and you'll have to do it over again. The second part is, don't be in a hurry. Take your time. Just vacuum nice and slowly. It will take a little while, but if you remember to keep the eyeball down and to the right, you'll really only be vacuuming a very small part of the pool. Now, that's something you're just going to have to do, and it depends on where you live. If you're close to a farm or an interstate or something like that, how often you have to vacuum your pool. But it is one of those things that does take a little time, unless you have an automatic pool sweep, which we'll talk about in just this next section. So let's talk about how you hook up your automatic pool sweep. Now this is a dirt demon. Now at Family Leisure, we carry about 6 different automatic pool sweeps. All of them work. All of them specialize in different things, but most of them hook up almost exactly the same way. So I'm going to use this as an example of all of the pool sweeps that we carry. The Dirt Demon is a suction side sweep. What that means is it works just like your manual pool sweep in that it sucks the dirt from the bottom of the pool and it takes it back to the filter, and that's how it picks the dirt up and cleans it. There are pressure side sweeps, which is taking the water out of the pool that's coming back into the pool, stirring the dirt up and putting it into a bag. Now personally, I prefer a suction side sweep because it sweeps the bottom of the pool and it takes it to the filter, not to a separate bag that you have to clean and that you hope filters as well as your filter. So this is a suction side sweep. The first thing to do to hook up a suction side sweep, you're going to take the hose and start attaching it. Now this hose, the open side, goes on to the end of the pool sweep. And then these hoses come in sections where you simply keep attaching them. Each 4-foot section just gets attached and attached until you have enough hose to cover the whole pool. When you get all the hose put together, then there'll be what's called the leader hose. The leader hose is the hose that has no joint. See how this has a tapered side? Well, this one has no tapered sides, and you put that on, and that's the last hose to go on. Then you're going to have what's called a flow adapter. Now there's a little arrow on here that's showing which way the water should be flowing. So in this case, it's going on right here, slides on, so that the water is coming in through this flow, in through this adapter. Then you're going to put on this rubber adapter. At this point, it's all assembled. So again, imagine that the pool sweep is in the water, the hose is all floating around in the water. The first thing that you have to do, just like in the manual pool system, is you have to prime the hose, which means you're going to hold this over the return jet. What will happen is, as the water comes back into the pool, it will fill this hose. So the hose will fill up, it'll start to float, the vacuum head, the dirt demon will float up, bubble, and then it will float back down. But again, remember your patience. Don't be in a hurry. Wait for that hose to be completely full of water. Then you're going to come over here, remove the basket, and in one quick motion, take this down inside the skimmer. What will happen is that will suck down, just like in your manual system. And now the water is being pulled from the sweep back through the hose down into your filter. Now what's going to happen is there's a little diaphragm, a little diaphragm in here that's going to make this sweep move along the bottom of the pool. And as it does, it will stir up the dirt, it'll be sucked back. All pool sweeps work the same way. They automatically propel themselves through the water to pick up the dirt. So basically you have 5 or 10 minutes to hook it up, and then you simply let it work. Now, one word of caution: do not leave the pool sweep in the pool all the time. And the reason that is because of the hose. This hose, over time, as that sweep moves in a circular pattern, will start to get twisted up. And as it's getting more and more twisted, the sweep will not cover the whole pool. It'll only cover a small section because it won't be able to straighten all that hose out. If that ever happens, disconnect all the hoses from each other, lay them out in the yard or on the driveway in the sunlight, and that will unshrink or untwist the hoses, then reassemble them. Just because they look like toys, these are pool sweeps. Don't leave them in the water because it will cause a problem with the hose. Basically, what you're going to do is leave the sweep in the pool. Usually overnight is what I do, is put it in the evening, let it run overnight, and then in the morning I'll take it out, see how my filter looks, make sure everything's working fine, and we're finished. It's basically, usually in my case, about a once a week thing. So, manual pool sweep is an exercise in patience. Automatic pool sweep takes about 5 minutes. Certainly, I recommend an automatic pool sweep. There is a fourth type of pool sweep. You have manual, you have suction side, you have pressure side, and the fourth type of pool sweep is called a robotic cleaner. Now, what a robotic cleaner is exactly what it sounds like. It's a little robot. It has its own motor that drives it around on the bottom of the pool. What it does is that motor jet propels the sweep across the pool. It literally is jet propulsion using water. And at the same time, it stirs the dirt off the bottom. And like a pressure side cleaner, when it stirs that dirt up, it stirs it into this bag. Now, this particular bag is the 3-micron bag. It's a very, very, very fine bag. And the Hornet, this particular sweep, comes standard with this bag. Now, also available is a mesh bag, which is a lot bigger grit, which means it will pick up large pieces of dirt, but it will miss some of the very fine particles of dirt. The advantage to the mesh bag is when you're first getting your pool running in the spring, if you have a lot of dirt and leaves and debris in the pool, the mesh bag will catch it, but not get clogged up. After you've gotten the pool clean, you would switch then to this very fine bag, because this will get clogged up much faster with leaves than the mesh bag. But this bag actually filters finer than your normal filtration does. This is down to 3 microns. So it's a great bag. It catches everything. After the sweep has run for a while, if your bag ever gets dirty, you simply pull it off and clean it. You can actually run it through your washing machine, and that will clean it. Put it back together, and it runs. But basically, this is a robotic cleaner. The advantage to a robotic cleaner is it runs by itself, and you don't have to hook it up to the filter system. You don't have to hook it up to anything. You don't have to worry about priming the hose. You literally throw it in, wait till it hits the bottom, plug it in, and let it run. And it will clean very, very effectively. The other big advantage to it is now you actually have a second filter. Rather than just the filter on the side of the pool, you have another filter on the bottom of the pool helping to keep your water absolutely sparkling clean. That's the fourth type of pool sweep. We offer all of the pool sweeps at Family Leisure at absolutely guaranteed lowest prices. So let's talk about the most important thing about taking care of your pool, and that's making sure that it's safe. Pools are great, great fun for the children and for the whole family, even the neighbors and friends. But they have to be taken care of and maintained as a safe environment. I cannot stress enough that there's some very, very simple things that you have to do to keep the pool environment safe. Now, when you got your pool from Family Leisure, you will have gotten a folder like this. And inside of that folder are many, many things. Some of it, of course, is just general information, like the notes for this pool school. How to take care of your pool in a step-by-step manner. You will receive things like how to open your pool and close your pool, and an algae-free guarantee. So nice general information. But much more important than that, you'll be getting things like safety information. What you need to do to make sure that you take care of your pool and keep it safe. First and foremost is never let anyone dive into the pool. All above-ground pools are shallow, much too shallow for diving or jumping without risking serious injury. So never allow people to jump or dive, or even rough play, pushing and shoving off a deck into a pool can also be very dangerous. One of my first jobs as a very young man, was as a lifeguard. And I learned very quickly that very small children oftentimes do not have any fear of the water, and they should. So please keep an eye on your children. They're also attached, or coming in that folder, are some things to put on the side of the pool. These are warning stickers that are extras that we provide. If you need more, please let us know. They're free, we just give them to you, and you affix those to the side of the pool. The manufacturer has put some on. All of the manufacturers of all of the components, like this ladder, the step system, will have stickers that warn, do not jump, do not dive, and things like that. But if for some reason you build a deck and it covers the stickers that are provided by the manufacturer, we will give you additional ones, and those are inside of that folder. Please use them. Every local code, government, county, municipality will have fencing restrictions, or what's called a barrier of access to the pool. Now, in most places, it's a 4-foot or 6-foot barrier of access. Sometimes the pool itself can be the barrier. Sometimes a fence needs to be constructed. What oftentimes people will do is put a fence around the top edge of the pool, just around the pool to protect it. But at all times, there needs to be a 4-foot to 6-foot barrier of access between the house or the yard and the pool. When you're not using the pool, all of the systems, the entry systems, will have a ladder that can either come off like this or will flip up and lock into place. When not using the pool, please remove your step system ladder so that there is still that barrier of access. Most of the time, the problem with a swimming pool is not your own children. It's the children from the neighborhood, or children that don't realize the rules of staying away from the pool. So you have to maintain a safe environment, not just for your own children, but from other children in the neighborhood. All of this is just common sense. We all want our pool to be simple, easy, and fun, not dangerous. So please read the information that we provide. Please put the stickers on that we provide, that the manufacturers provide, and please follow the safety guidelines and keep this a safe and fun environment for everyone. Now, at Family Leisure, we also sell ancillary products to help enhance the safety of the pool. We have safety alarms, or alarms that if a child or even a ball or anything lands in the water, an alarm goes off. These are alarms that basically tell you if something goes on that you're not aware of, and it goes off. Now, we sell alarms, we sell gate alarms, so if you have a gate that accesses the pool, it'll go off and let you know that somebody's entering the pool area. Lots of ancillary products to keep everything safe at your Family Leisure store. But please, let us know how we can help. So thank you for attending Pool School. I hope this was informative. Keep in mind there are many, many things available to online through your Family Leisure website, for as far as whether it be purchasing, of course, but all kinds of extra information. We have on our website frequently asked questions, just general information. What will happen when we install your pool? All of those processes are available on your website, or please call Family Leisure. Remember, if I can leave you with any thought at all, is we're here at Family Leisure. We're here to help you. We want to make sure that your pool is simple, easy, and fun. Welcome to the advanced supplement to Family Leisure's Pool School. What we're going to talk about in this part of the Pool School is a little bit more detail on what is alkalinity. How does it work? Why does it impact pH so much? We'll talk about what is pH and why that's so important. And we're going to talk about chlorine, what it really is, how it really works, and why so many things impact its effectiveness. So let's start at the beginning, and that's alkalinity. First of all, as I mentioned in the basic pool school, alkalinity is a measure of the alkali ions in the water. Now, alkali ions are basically salt ions with a positive charge. So, for example, low alkalinity, you would have 3 alkali ions in the water. That's very few alkali ions. However, if you have 3 plus ions, 3 negatively charged ions, the minuses and the positives balance. So your pH is neutral. So pH is balanced. Where the problem comes in with low alkalinity is, let's say it rains and you get some pollution in the water that has a positive charge. Well, now instead of having 3 alkali ions, you have 6. If you still only have 3 negative ions, your pH is very, very wrong. It's wrong by 50% because now it's 6 to 3. Okay, so then you're going to add some negative ions to the water called pH minus. So you add some negative ions to the water, and let's say you put in 9. Well, now the pH is very, very negative, again by about 35%, because you've got 6 pluses and 9 negatives. You can see that by adding and adding and adding and adding, the pH is going to be bouncing all over the place because there just isn't enough ions in the water to make it stable. That's what happens with low alkalinity. That's why it's so important to get your alkalinity up if it's too low. The alternative is, what if there's lots and lots of alkalinities in the water? Lots of pluses, lots. And it's balanced with lots and lots of negatives. So now the alkalinity is very high, it's balanced with negatives, but the pH is wrong because there's slightly more pluses or slightly more negatives. Well, now to impact the plus or the minus to get the pH neutral, you have to add tons and tons of pluses to balance out all those negatives, or tons and tons of negatives to balance out all those pluses. So what's happening is the pH tends to get locked in place if you have a lot of alkalinity and a lot of negative ions. It takes a lot of work to adjust your pH. That's why it's so important that you have a good amount of alkali ions, and in this case we'll represent that as 12, and a good amount of negative ions, we'll represent that as 12, and your pH is neutral. Now you can add some pH plus or pH minus without significantly impacting the alkalinity and without messing with the pH. So alkalinity is a measure of how many alkali ions are in the water, but the reason it's so important is so that it's easy to keep your pH in balance. So as we talked about in the basic pool school, pH is very important because if the pH is wrong, the chemicals turn into gases. They break down and become ineffective. And also if the pH is wrong, the eyes get red and irritated. Your children's eyes will be irritated by swimming. So pH, as we discussed in basic pool school, has to be adjusted with pH plus or pH minus. Now let's talk a little bit more about why the chlorine does not work if the pH is wrong. First of all, I want you to remember that chlorine in its natural state is a gas. So chlorine combines with something, they put it in the water, it works, but when it breaks down, it turns into a gas. It goes away. So when your pH is wrong, that chlorine model becomes very unstable, it breaks down, it turns into a gas. And so you're adding chlorine to the water, but it's not doing anything, it's simply going away. Now, we talked about, in the basic pool school, we talked about evaporation, turning molecules into gas. Hydrogen and oxygen form water when they turn into gas. The evaporation occurs. Well, same thing happens with chlorine. If it turns into a gas, it simply goes away and you're wasting money on chlorine. Not to mention, as we talked about in the basic pool school, it impacts the children's eyes. So now let's talk about chlorine. What is it and how does it work? Well, first of all, chlorine in its natural state is a gas, and it's a negatively charged ion, Cl minus. And chlorine loves to combine with things. In particular, chlorine loves to combine with metals like sodium. So you have a chemical called NaCl. Na is sodium plus, Cl is chlorine, negative. Sodium chloride, well, we call that table salt. And as I talked about in basic pool school, when chlorine combines with sodium, it forms basically a stable salt, and it's neutral. It's not affecting anything. It's not killing anything. Well, chlorine also likes to combine with something called amino acids. Now, amino acids are the basic building block for proteins. So when chlorine combines with an amino acid, it's called a chloramine. So why is that important? And we'll call that a chloramine. It's chlorine combined with an amino acid. Well, the reason that's so important is our bodies are great big combinations of proteins, which means we're a collection of amino acids. So let me give you an example. If you take some liquid chlorine, pour it on your hand and leave it sit there for a little while. Now this is very strong chlorine. And you let it sit there for a little while, and all of a sudden you say, well, that burns. See, go like that, you throw it down, you look at it, and you can see a mark on your skin where the chlorine was. Well, you know what that was the chlorine stripping amino acids out of your skin. Well, in this case, it comes a little uncomfortable. Dip your hand in a little water, you make it feel a little better. But that's the way chlorine works. It strips amino acids out of whatever it is it's attacking when it forms a chloramine. Well, for you and I, that just means we get a little dry skin, a little irritation, or something like that. But if you're a small, single-cell animal like a bacteria, if you lose some amino acids, you die. If you're a virus and you lose some amino acids, you die. If you're a small plant like algae and you lose some amino acids, it kills it. So what's happening, the way chlorine kills, is it strips amino acids off of whatever it is attacking. Then the chlorine combined with the amino acids becomes a chloramine, and it's very, very stable. That's why shock is so important. Shock is a very, very powerful, any of the shocks are very powerful oxidizing agents. What an oxidizing agent does is it strips away the bonds between the chlorine and the amino acids. It just strips that bond away, and that frees the chlorine up to be reactivated. That's why shocking is so important. It doesn't add chlorine. If you use a potassium monopersulfate shock, it doesn't add chlorine to the water. But what it does do is it keeps reactivating the chlorine. Now, it's important to remember, just when you shock the pool doesn't mean your chlorine level is going to go up. It is simply taking the chlorine and making it reactive. Now, there are shocks that add chlorine, but we don't recommend those as we talked about in basic pool school. So, as a refresher, alkalinity, very, very important because it affects pH. pH, very, very important because it affects chlorine. And chlorine, we know we have to keep enough chlorine in the water to kill anything that's in the water by stripping out those amino acids. And the way we keep it active is by shocking the pool. The last chemical that I want to talk about in the advanced version of pool school is cyanuric acid. We call it conditioner. What that does is that helps to keep the chlorine in the water. Chlorine in its natural state is a gas. Well, what conditioner is a buffer solution. It attaches itself to the chlorine to hold it in the water. So as it's exposed to ultraviolet light, or if the pH gets way out of whack, but mostly for the ultraviolet light, as it's exposed to ultraviolet light, it does not turn back into a gas and go away. Now, cyanuric acid is one of those chemicals that the EPA loves. If you put it in your swimming pool, cover it up, 100 years from now, if the water's still there, conditioner will still be in the water. It doesn't go away. That's why conditioner is a once-a-year treatment. We recommend your water is professionally tested the second year to see how much conditioner you need to add, only for the amount of water that you've added as you open your pool. You don't have to retreat the foundation water. Now, the second time that you might want to have it tested would be in July or August to see how much conditioner you need, because again, you'll have added water from splashing and evaporation. You'll have added a lot of water over the course of the pool season that you may need to add a little bit more conditioner. Now remember, if you add too much conditioner, it will slow the chlorine down. The chlorine will not be able to react the way it should. Too little conditioner, ultraviolet light is going to hit it and it's going to evaporate way more than it should. So there's an optimal amount of cyanuric acid or conditioner in your water. The last thing we want to talk about is algicides. Now, there are a lot of different types of algicides. You know, I personally recommend copper algicide, but there's a little bit we have to talk about with copper algicide, its use, and how you test for it. First of all, copper goes into the water and it's very, very stable. The only way the copper comes out of the water is it comes out in your hair or on your arms. That's how it comes out. Copper doesn't really kill anything so much as it inhibits its growth. Its presence in the water keeps an algae from growing. It inhibits photosynthesis. As you remember from second grade, photosynthesis is how a plant feeds itself. Well, copper being in the water, it keeps the plant from performing photosynthesis, the algae from performing photosynthesis, and it dies. So copper algicide isn't the fastest way to kill algae. Chlorine is, because it goes in and kills it. But algicide keeps the algae from growing. It inhibits its growth. By having a little copper algicide in the water, it keeps algae from ever forming. That's why I said in the basic pool school that really it's an insurance policy. If you forget to add chlorine, you don't have enough chlorine in the water, it rains, whatever happened, if you have a little copper algicide in the water, you won't get algae formation. Now, we'll talk about algicide a little bit. In chlorine water chemistry, I always say more is better. If it's, say, test at 3, get it up a little bit. Because there's so many things that bring your chlorine level down, you might as well keep it a little bit high. Just make sure you keep your pH in balance. Copper is the other way. Chlorine water chemistry, more is better. Copper water chemistry, less is better. Keep in mind, the copper isn't just coming out of the water. It's not getting used up like chlorine gets used up. Copper doesn't do that. Its presence in the water works. But there's a downside. Too much copper in the water. Well, let me give you a good example of how you test for too much copper. Take a little blonde girl, stick her in the head in the water, not too long, pull it out, and if her hair comes out green, you have too much copper in the water. That's the problem with too much copper. If you have too much copper in the water, you can turn the children's blonde hair green. You can actually even stain the pool or stain the pool liner. So you don't want ever too much copper. Follow the instructions on the bottle. Whatever it says, that's what you add. And if anything, not too much. I know I use the example to customers all the time that I look at chlorine water chemistry the way I do doing the laundry. You know, when it says add 1/4 of a cup or add a cup, you know, I pour that in the wash machine and I add a little bit more and pour that in. Because, you know, too much isn't going to hurt, can only help, right? Well, copper's the other way. Chlorine water chemistry is like that. Copper water chemistry says add 1/4 of a cup. Yeah, it might be too much. You know, I won't go down. Copper water chemistry, you always want to go down. Chlorine water chemistry, you always want to go up. So, as a recap, we've talked about alkalinity, talked about pH, how chlorine works, what cyanuric acid does, and what you have to be careful for in using copper algicide. Now, to avoid the green and the stain and the mistakes and things like that, there are lots of other algicides out there. There's silver algicide, very, very effective, a little bit more expensive than copper. There are some non-mineral algicides. These are kind of polychemicals. There's lots and lots of chemicals in them. And those are also effective algicides, but generally those are not as effective as copper and usually a little less expensive. And frankly, I just think copper is the best. We offer all of them. All of the other ones are available. Frankly, I think copper algicide is the best way to go. You can see that water chemistry is very simple. You add your chlorine, test your pH and alkalinity, of course, keep some cyanuric acid in the pool, add some algicide. Again, you should never spend more than 15 or 20 minutes on your pool a week on water chemistry. So let's talk about the Perma Salt system. The Perma Salt system is without a doubt the most effective, easiest, and least expensive system on the market today. And so that meets all my criteria. It's effective, it works, and it's easy and inexpensive. So it's the perfect system. So let's talk about the Perma Salt system. The system begins with the Perma Salt chamber or controller. Now what this is this a machine, this contraption, basically takes copper. See, there's little 2 copper bars in there, and it puts an electric charge to the copper, and that ionizes the copper. It breaks it down and puts copper in the water. Now copper is an extremely effective algicide. So what happens if you have copper in the water, no algae can grow. So it's perfect, and you simply adjust how much electricity, which controls how much copper, goes into the water with these little buttons. You know, up, of course, means more copper, down is less copper. So after you fill your pool, you turn it way up, get the copper level up. You know, you test the water for copper, just like you normally would test for chlorine, and you adjust it to 0.3 parts per million. Now the great part, because copper is not bothered by sunlight and rain and all those other things, the great part is you only test for copper every 2 weeks. So the simple part of the system is you're not messing with it. And not copper, those copper bars, this chamber should last all season. Now the second component is the salt. Now remember, this is a Perma Salt system, sort of like the permafrost. It's always there. When you first fill a pool, you're going to add 2 bags of pool salt to the water. Now, a traditional salt system, you have to add salt all the time because it's breaking the salt down into chlorine. In fact, a salt system is really just a chlorine generator. That's not the case in the Perma Salt. When you add salt to the system, it's only when you fill the pool, and that's to raise the TDS so that ionized copper can move through the water a little easier. But you never add salt again unless you change all the water. So it's Perma Salt. Now, the next thing that we have to talk about in the Perma Salt system is prep rate. Now, prep rate is a once-a-year treatment. You add all 25 pounds into the skimmer, and it'll go out and it'll put sodium tetraborate in the water, which is an extremely powerful algicide. It eliminates carbon dioxide, but that prepares the water and it's good for the whole season. So you're just adding it 1 time a year. The next component is the shock treatment. You know, like a chlorine system, you have to re-energize everything and shock it, sterilize it, shock the pool, and it's a 2-part shock. First of all, there's the initiate. You add that once a week, and then there's reactivate, once every 2 weeks, I'm sorry. And then there's reactivate, where you add them both just every 2 weeks. Add them at the same time, just pour them in the skimmer every 2 weeks. So it's very, very simple. And that will re-energize the system and sterilize the system. If you ever have really high bather loads, the Cub Scouts come over or whatever, you have a big pool party, you know, it doesn't hurt to add another couple bags just to keep a little extra punch in the system. Now, if your pool is greater than 27 foot, so if you have a 30 or 33 or one of the bigger ovals, in your case, you're going to use 2 bags every 2 weeks. But again, you're going to test the water every 2 weeks and add 2 bags of shock every 2 weeks. That's it so far. And then the last thing is clarate. Now, clarate is a natural enzyme clarifier. What that means, those natural enzymes eat oils. So let's face it, when you go swimming, you've always put sunscreen and things like that on the kids. Well, those oils get on the surface of the water and they collect dust. And they can cause a scum line on the side of the pool. By putting in the clarate, these enzymes will eat those oils. It keeps the water sparkling clean and eliminates that scum line that can form. So clarate, again, one bottle for any size pool every 2 weeks. So think about how simple this is. You know, you're going to adjust your copper level every 2 weeks, test the water, adjust the copper. Every 2 weeks, you're going to add 2 bags of shock. Every 2 weeks, 1 bottle of clarate. So in a 16-week summer, you're going to test the water 8 times. That's it. And this is absolutely guaranteed to be effective. So at the end of the year, you'll close the pool with Winterate. In the springtime, you'll get what we call reload kit. And in that reload kit, you'll get a bucket of prep rate. You'll get 8 bags of initiate, 8 bags of reactivate, and 8 bottles of clarate. And you'll get a replacement chamber. Now this chamber has 2 new copper bars. It simply replaces the old chamber, the old copper bars, and you're up and running for a whole nother season. Perma Salt is without a doubt the most effective, easiest, least expensive system on the market today.
Where family and fun come together.